And here's our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you from Beijing on CGTN. I'm Tian Wei. We begin in Beijing, where Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan is on a two-day visit to China. He met with Chinese President Xi Jinping today and attended the closing ceremony of the Beijing International Horticultural Exhibition. On Tuesday, he met with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, and the two leaders agreed to step up cooperation. It's Mr. Khan's third visit to China since he took office last year, a sign of blossoming ties between the two neighbors. Before we get down to a discussion, let's take a quick look at the highlights of the Pakistani leader's trip to China.
With the backdrop of performances at the closing ceremony of the International Horticultural Exhibition, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to China wrapped up his third since taking office last August. At the Jiaoyutai State Guest House on Wednesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping told Mr. Khan that China and Pakistan were all-weather strategic cooperative partners. No matter the change in the international and regional situation, President Xi said friendship between China and Pakistan had been unbreakable and rock-solid, and China-Pakistan cooperation had always been vibrant. On Tuesday, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said friendly relations between the two countries, which have no strings attached and are not targeted at any third party, enjoy a profound, solid foundation with the heartfelt support of the two peoples. Li said China had supported Pakistan in safeguarding its independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and legitimate rights and interests. Military officials from both countries also met on Tuesday, and they agreed to nurture ties between their armed forces. During his meeting with Premier Li, Mr. Khan said Pakistan was ready to work with China under the Belt and Road and attached great importance to the construction of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and Gwadar Port. The two witnessed the signing ceremony for a series of bilateral cooperation agreements, including infrastructure construction, law enforcement and security, culture, education, and media.
For more on Pakistani Prime Minister's visit to China, we are joined by three guests in Islamabad, Pakistan. Ijaz Hussain, who is a political and military analyst at Pakistan's Iqra University. In New Delhi, we invited Avinash Godbole, who is an assistant professor who's also a political economist. And joining us in Beijing, last but not least, Zhou Rong, senior analyst from Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. He stayed in Pakistan for more than 10 years as a journalist there. Welcome to the three of you to our program. Mr. Hussain, of course, start from you. Expectations for this visit likely to be what?
I think this visit of Pakistani Prime Minister to China is very crucial and is very timely. It is a wonderful opportunity to discuss bilateral relationship in terms of underscoring the importance of CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is part and parcel of the China's Belt and Road Initiative. Other than this, the two sides, they would like to interact with each other in terms of discussing the security situation in Afghanistan in particular, and also the situation or the plight of the Kashmiris in Indian-occupied Kashmir. So these are the two broader areas which, in my view, are going to be discussed.
Sure. Mr. Zhou, of course, China-Pakistan enjoying so-called all-weather friendship. Of course, things have been changing so fast over the past few years, globally and, of course, regionally as well. So how to see the immediate result of this interaction between the Pakistani Prime Minister and the Chinese President now? What would that mean for the near future, Mr. Zhou?
I think it's very important because we all know the good slogan for Sino-Pakistan friendly people just describe us higher than Himalaya mountain, deeper than Indian Ocean, sweeter than honey, and harder than iron. So that's why we are called Iron Brothers. But right now, that is for current international relations, or the bilateral relations, especially on the second phase of the CPEC. So Chinese and the Pakistan leader need to discuss something more, especially certain kind of regional crisis. and China and the Pakistan leader need to have a very frequent consultation with each other. We can say that recently we noticed one thing, that is within 12 months that the Chinese leader and the Pakistan leaders, I mean Prime Minister Imran Khan and President Xi Jinping,
right,
and also Prime Minister Li Keqiang just met 3 times. That can see the solidarity of the 2 bilateral relationships.
Yeah, well, you know, analogies as beautiful as they are certainly a great way to remember the past, but right now things are much more complicated than just a reminiscence of the past. So, Mr. Zhou, if I could go into some details before we invite in our Indian guest about the issues raised by both sides, Chinese side and Pakistani side. Belt and Road Initiative, of course, the corridor is good for Pakistan's economic development. The question really is, what is China having in mind out of this?
Yes, we all know that is for CPEC, we say that the flagship project of the Belt and Road. It is very important to enhance Pakistan economy, especially Pakistan energy and infrastructure as weakness. You see that is why was in Pakistan we usually just suffer something about 8 hours load shedding every day. But right now, I think that all this kind of load shedding has been removed.
My question is not that, but my question rather is, what is China having in mind? Of course, whether the friendship would bring China much closer to the supporter front of Pakistan, but it is a business that we're talking about. So, Mr. Zhou, what are some of the immediate and mid-term businesses China can do, Belt and Road Initiative, for both sides, since we're talking about win-win, Mr. Zhou?
So we are going to finish the first phase of the CPEC. We are going to start the second phase of CPEC. So we would like to just make the CPEC project go very smoothly. So we need to pinpoint some detail and discuss some concrete matters. Okay,
Mr. Hussein, will those concrete matters be really discussed? Will they be implemented as discussed, Mr. Hussein?
Well, I think since the inception of CPEC in 2015, there are a lot of projects, especially in the energy sector, which have been completed in time, and there are other projects in energy and infrastructure development sector which are already in the pipeline. And the Pakistani government is quite cautious and quite willing to do the needful. And I think the Chinese side is also collaborating with its Pakistani counterpart in this respect. And yesterday, the Pakistani Minister for Development Reform, and he also categorically mentioned that CPEC is here to stay and is going to get expanded in the years to come with the inclusion of some new projects such as hydropower, steel mills, and etc. So in my view, the projects already, some of them they already been done, and the others they are in the pipeline. So it's going to stay here. It's not something which has been abandoned as normally been highlighted in certain regional and international media. So it is here.
Having said that, though, let's invite in our Indian participant, Mr. Govule. You've been listening to your colleagues from both sides, China and Pakistan. Of course, there's one thing that has not been mentioned, that is the Kashmir issue. Now, on that issue, both India and Pakistan, which are mainly the players regarding this conflict and controversy. Meanwhile, China also and India has some different understandings on certain issues related to it as well. So, Mr. Godbole, this visit of Pakistan Prime Minister taking place right before Chinese President Xi Jinping making a visit to India and meeting with the Prime Minister there. So what would you make of the earlier discussion between your two colleagues?
Well, India does not worry about Imran Khan's visit to China. Let me just clarify that in the first place. Because India knows that India's relations with China is much more mature, and we also have global issues of concern over which we have common perspectives and understandings. So I do not believe in the first place that this visit by the Pakistani Prime Minister would at any rate derail the visit by President Xi Jinping to India. Now, having said that, I am also not worried if Imran Khan were to raise the Kashmir issue in Beijing, because I'm sure, I mean, all of us are aware that Beijing has clarified that the issue is a bilateral issue to be resolved between India and Pakistan. And I appreciate China for maintaining that consistency and maturity over a period of last 70 years vis-a-vis the issue between India and Pakistan.
All right. Mr. Zhou, go ahead.
Yes. I really agree to the point of that our Indian friend said that the relationship between India and China is quite mature. That's really true. May not be influenced by some third parties, countries, Prime Minister visit. But I would like to highlight here, number one, China will continue to support Pakistan to safeguard its territory integrity and independent sovereignty. But that kind of position may not change. But we really hope that through bilateral talk, Pakistan and India can solve the problem of Kashmir. For the Indian side, they don't want the third party to join in. But anyway, China really support the bilateral talk, bilateral dialogue between the two countries, not through the military way, but through the peaceful dialogue way to solve the problem.
Okay.
But anyway, India should just, to a certain degree, accept the Pakistan initiative that to have a dialogue on Kashmir issues with Pakistan.
Okay, Mr. Begabule, 30 seconds for you before I move on to Mr. Hussain.
Yes, Kashmir is not Pakistan's territorial issue. Let China support other issues that it wants to support Pakistan for, be it Afghanistan, be it other terrorism issues, be it Taliban. We are not worried about it too much.
Okay.
But Kashmir is not Pakistan's territorial issue. It's an issue that India, and secondly, India is ready to talk with Pakistan on all issues only after terrorism stops, and I support this stance taken by our government presently.
Okay, of course we need to let Mr. Hussain from Pakistan to have his say. Mr. Hussain, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to totally disagree with my Indian colleague. I think he has presented a very distorted statement of facts, historical fact. For example, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir is bilateral between India and Pakistan. Of course it is, but it is to be decided as per the UN Security Council resolutions, of which China has supported Pakistan multiple times. And secondly, India is also is planning to do the genocide of the Kashmiris. You know, there's a curfew imposed in the last 2 months. People, they cannot move out. There's a food insecurity going on, and also there's a media or communication blackout. So I think the Indian side needs to realize is that Pakistan is a party to the dispute, so is India, and so are the Kashmiris, and this matter is to be resolved internationally as per the UN resolutions. As far as bilateral dialogue between Pakistan and India is concerned, I do second it, but this is something which is to be talked about between two sides, and I think China has a role to play in this regard. And the upcoming visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to India is a platform where we can raise this issue with his Indian counterpart.
Mr. Zhou, of course, as a counterpart of both countries, China to India and to also Pakistan, China is in an important position, but also China is in a sensitive area. So how to keep this balance, to stick to the principles, while at the same time be flexible in being the bridge in a way on certain issues that China would like to have a role?
Let's say borrow one of the words from the former Pakistan Foreign Minister, Mr. Masood Khan's, his word, former Pakistan ambassador of China, and he said, talk is better than fight. What I'm saying here is we do encourage all kinds of dialogue between Pakistan and India. Even sometimes our Indian friend does not like to accept, but we still encourage certain kind of process. We don't discourage, we discourage any kind of way to heighten the escalation of the tight situation. We don't hope so. So even Kashmir issue is very complicated. We still hope India can accept Pakistan proposal to have a bilateral talk on the issue.
Now, let's just wrap it up a little bit, at least on this issue, because every one of the three of you have already stated your opinions, and you interacted also with any of the other two parties. So let's put that aside and talk about some very pragmatic issues. Trade, for example, which is to the interest of everybody. And Mr. Begabule, so how are we going to see the regional trade, for example, China, Pakistan, India, India, China, India, Pakistan even to a certain extent, be flourishing from here, as this is one of the most dynamic areas in Asia?
Well, actually, I would like to clarify one of the propaganda raised by my Pakistani friend. There is no genocide happening in Kashmir right now, and none of that is the reality. That's all fabrication being deliberately propagated as an anti-India issue, and I condemn it highly strongly. India-China trade is a very good, on a better platform right now than where it was. But we are still waiting for China to open up some of the sectors that it had committed to open up. And we are also waiting for China to actualize its promises that it has made to India in the historic visit of Prime Minister Modi in 2014. Some of the issues like Railway University, Skills Park, and the infrastructure development zones in Orissa, and the sectoral investments in Haryana and provinces of Tamil Nadu are actually yet to materialize. So we also hope that while this visit actually leads to some kind of agreements, we need to sit down together as India and China to discuss some of the issues that have not moved forward over the past 5 years.
So what you're saying is, Mr. Gobole, mainly India's role is to sit there and wait, because you've been using waiting for 3 times. You know, you are waiting, and you are waiting. Is India's role mainly to wait?
India and China have signed enough number of agreements in the past also, glorious agreements in the visits of 2014 and 2015. We need to work on the issues, on the base which have troubled the investment promises made in those agreements also, instead of focusing on signing more new agreements.
I see.
So India is waiting in the sense of agreements to actualize.
Mr. Joe, go ahead. Respond to your Indian colleague.
Yeah, for the on the regard of the trade between bilateral trade between India and China, I would like to highlight certain kind of points. Number one is our Indian friends need to promote the quality of its own products. They need to have a more chance to export more to China. Currently, the Indian-China's trade is only 2/3 of the trade between China and Vietnam, and 1/4 of that amount between China and South Korea. So right now, India need to promote its quality of the product to find more opportunity to export to China. That's number one.
All right.
And and number two is, we need to have a very matured FTA, the free trade agreement, and to enhance within this kind of framework, and China and India can export to each other more. And also, India should also invite more and more Chinese counterparts to invest, to have the joint venture with India to re-export some product made by both India and China to the third countries.
Got it. What about for you, Mr. Hussain, from the Pakistan perspective? Bilateral trade between China and Pakistan. Meanwhile, is Pakistan looking at potential of having more trade relationship with India, even though your Indian colleague tried to turn away from that proposal?
Well, before I come to the bilateral trade between Pakistan and China, let me reiterate the fact that the Indian guest, I think, is again distorting facts and history. You should read an editorial published in New York Times just a couple of days ago, which highlighted the plight of the Kashmiri people who've been, kind of cornered in that region. And there is, of course, there is a planned genocide by this fascist, misogynist, right-winger BJP government led by Narendra Modi. Now, coming to the bilateral trade between Pakistan and China, the volume is increasing with time, and I think currently it has surpassed more than $20 billion US dollars per annum, and there is, of course, a capacity and also potential to enhance and promote bilateral trade by these two countries. And in this regard, I think this visit of Pakistani Prime Minister to China is very handy. And lastly, let me finish. I won't mind, in my individual opinion, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is a very viable project of the BRI, and if regional countries from South Asia, especially Afghanistan or India, if they like to join in my view, that would be a welcome sign, and that would lead to mutual harmony and stability within the region.
I see. Mr. Zhou, briefly respond to your Pakistani colleague.
Yeah, I really hope that is the volume of the bilateral trade between our two countries to promote more. But I think one of the important things which I used to recommend in certain kind of other forum, that is to say, to make a joint venture, that is to say, not necessarily made in China or made in Pakistan, but made in by CPEC. So that is a use CPEC framework to do some more joint venture. And with a Chinese technology, with a Pakistan location, then we can produce some more high quality product to export to the third party, third country, and even the Middle East, even the Central Asia, and some other area.
I see.
Even we would
there are a lot of proposals.
invite Indian to join in, such as in Lahore, we can just establish the certain kind of industrial park with the three countries' capital together. Thank you.
Mr. Gaubole, you want to respond to that very briefly?
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues that has been between India and China vis-a-vis trade has been the opening of a pharmaceutical market. I have seen countless number of Chinese guests coming to India and buying essential things such as cancer drugs and even other requirements for their daily usage. And when you ask them, and that's also in huge quantities, mind you, and when you ask them why don't they support the opening of the sector on that, they just smile at you and they point to some certain WTO regulations. Now my point is, when the rest of the world is consuming pharmaceuticals made in India,
is about
which are of good quality,
not just bilateral, but rather because you already talked about the bilateral, and you've been talking about your three weights. We already heard that. So why don't you respond to Mr. Zhou's proposal about the trilateral possibility? Yes. Is there a possibility or not? Clearly, from your side, of course, I know you are not representing the Indian government, but your analysis, very briefly, three parties, possible or not?
As long as Pakistan is sponsoring terrorism in India, I don't think it's going to happen.
Thank you so much for every one of you, the three of you, joining us for this discussion and your input.